Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 152nd CPR CSH workshop. Today we have with us Dr. Damien Carrière. He's currently a lecturer and researcher at ESPI Research in Real Estate Laboratory in France. He's also an associate researcher at the Centre for Social Science Studies of the African, American, and Asian worlds, in short CESMA, and also Institute for Strategic Research. Damien has done his PhD in geography from the University of Minnesota and the University of Paris 7. Today, Damien is going to talk about his paper, which is currently under review. The title of the talk is Lawless Order, Regulations, Illegalism, and Security Guardsmanship in Delhi. Damien, the floor is yours. Maybe about 45 minutes of your presentation, which will follow with questions and answers. So yes, next is Damien.
Thank you very much, Gaurav. So Mayfair Garden is a small enclave located south of the Hoskas Market, near the metro station. It seems to have been radically detached from the rest of the neighborhood by concrete walls and a long steel barrier that runs along a small park, separating it from the main street, where hawkers sell golgappas and cigarettes. The Resident Welfare Association has walled off all but one of its public street entrances. There it installed a two-story gatehouse, speed bumps, closed security camera, and a large iron gate that closed at night. And of course, security guards. Behind it, barely visible from the main road, stands the 15th century Makdumi Shah Pojat Mosque. It is one of the many mosque and tomb complexes that Delhi had swallowed. The monument, in the Delhi style of architecture, is classified by the Archaeological Survey of India as important, thanks to its rare arched balcony. However, its access has been de facto privatized for the exclusive enjoyment of the residents of Mayfair Garden, and a guard has been posted to prevent access to the less daring of architects enthusiasts. At night, the doors are closed, not only in Hoskas and in Mayfair Garden, but also in all the middle and upper class districts of Delhi. Now the question is, what allows the nightly transformation of Delhi into a labyrinth and the closure of the parks, moreover protected by the Archaeological Survey of India, to the exclusive use of upper class morning walkers? How does this walling works? The resident association have taken upon themselves to organize the security and exclusivity of their enclaves by setting their own dispositif of guardianship. This has integrated into the security assemblage, the more or less coherent ensemble of rules, law, firms, police actions, workers, and material devices that organize, in a mostly mundane and quite boring way, how the city can function, how people are kept in their place assigned to them, how gender and sections are enforced. If the conception of pluralized security and security assemblage is quite well shared in the literature on citizen security, the question is on how precisely the assemblage work on the daily fashion, how it establishes itself. I claim that a regime of illegalism is key to the provision of private security in Delhi, because it is through such regime that upper and middle classes control the violence that secures the territorial exclusivity. It lubricates how the different elements of the assemblage work together. It also permits to keep out of upper class neighborhood a more and more demonetized police. It is a condition for the guards to play their part in ensuring the long-term predictability of land value, crucial for the real estate economy. What I'll be trying to explain is how it works. I borrow the term illegalism from Foucault and point out with Feldman that, I quote, it stands as something like a positive functional part or element in our system of power relations. And later, illegalism would then appear to be a category of the dominant strategy, of a ruling rationality, end quote. In this presentation, I focus in particular on the rules and regulations around training. I think they exemplify the mismatch among different regimes of law and regulation that structures the assemblage of security in the Union Territory of Delhi, and which, I propose, open the door for illegalism as a way to organize work and control space. This article is based on a year of fieldwork conducted during my PhD dissertation, hosted in the Center for Policy Research. I focused my effort on two different neighborhoods, the rather posh Saket in the south of Delhi and the relatively low middle-class residential neighborhood of Dwarka in the east. It permitted me to compare the work of guards working in the street of the neighborhoods and that of those working in the malls, who benefit from a certain formation. Dwarka, contrary to Saket, was built with security in mind. High walls topped with barbed wires surround the blocks, while guards stand duty at the gate in pair. Neighborhood association, RWAs, have taken a large and increasing importance in the social spatial organization of the richer part of the city, to the extent of gaining the upper hand over their own security. During interviews, the head of an RWA in Saket confirmed that the gates of the neighborhoods were erected with the oral permission only of the municipal authorities, and that such permissions were never given in writing and could be removed at any time. For the RWA representatives, state institutions are too ineffective, corrupt, or incompetent to address what they call their security concerns. During interviews, representatives of resident welfare associations mentioned the inefficiency, laziness, and corruption of the police, as well as the potential violence of policemen as reasons for employing private security guards. It also fits the story that the private security industry likes to tell itself, a story in which, to quote Neocleus, capital once again appears to make its own inimitable contribution to national security. The private security guards can and do play the role of police forces, just to a certain public. Seen from this angle, the relative illegalism that marks the private security sector in India is easier to explain, since it plays above all the right role, that of the predictability of urban order, a predictability that makes wealthy neighborhoods comfortable for the production and reproduction of class inequalities, a predictability that permits investment, for example, speculation. I turn to a brief security provision in Delhi. There never was a moment when the Delhi police had a monopoly on the provision of security or violence over its jurisdiction. Paid by the neighborhood association, by the richest family, or even attached to some particular houses or havelis, chowkidars have continued exercising that was concomitant with that of the automatic teller machines, ATMs. For instance, the international leader and largest private security company, G4S, Group 4 Security, opened in India in 1989. Pound Security Rooms, the company launched by Wing Commander L.S. Bhatia, which I've studied in particular, was first registered in 1988. The New York Times notes the emergence of security companies in Delhi in 1988, when 80 companies employed today, and according to the authority on 1 million, depending on the sources. Various situations. Is no gated street of the upper and middle class neighborhoods, in factories to exert surveillance on workers, around the walls of lower middle class neighborhoods, in front of luxury shops, around the mall, inside the mall, and in front of the house as well to do, etc., etc., etc. Private security companies set contract with resident association, individual, large companies, as well as the state, in particular for the securitization of public buildings and heritage monuments, as well as of part of the Delhi metro. The service is as constant, Even if the turnover is high, an individual can be quickly replaced. Some of their work make chowkidars redundant, yet the former practice has not disappeared. As thus, the term chowkidar designates several realities. However, by and large, the chowkidar remain attached in the long run to the neighborhoods, the morale of the family employing them, whereas the security guards, on the contrary, work on a contractual system. That makes that the direct relationship of the chowkidar has maintained, like through this direct relationship, the chowkidars have maintained a quasi-feudal bond of mutual expectations. Chowkidars would expect, in exchange for the loyalty in a low-paid work, a loyalty from their employers, such as a help in retirement, help in financing a daughter's wedding, or an unexpected illness. Whereas contractual security guards are replaceable and movable from one post to the next. So loyalty is not expected any more than they expect a loyalty in return for the labor. During interviews, several security guards mentioned it as a loss for them, as a negative. They mentioned the passage from chowkidarship to security guardianship as negative evolution in their condition of labor. In the National Capital Territory of Delhi, the number of guards is now estimated to 250,000 by a source in the government's Home Department. A serious industry professional put the number at 500,000. And the Central Association of Private Security Industry, which claimed to represent the industry to the government, put the number of guards in Delhi only at 2 million, out of an estimated 7 million of guards in the whole of India. Of course, it's impossible to verify to start with, and second, I think this is a vastly overestimated figure. In order to help this nascent market and the entrepreneurs of violence, while keeping a relative control over the companies deploying men in the street, the Indian government has decided to legislate, as often, to licensing and franchising. The center has passed the Private Security Agency Act, PASARA, in 2005 and adapted it to Delhi in 2009. This is where I get back to share my screen. Where my screen is here. I insist on this point. The PASARA legislation is not a privatization of a once upon a time public police force. Private actors have never ceased to be a part of the landscape of security in Delhi, of the security assemblage of Delhi. The Delhi police has not conceded any of its prerogative or branch and has not ceased to under-recruit staff in order to contract out part of its work to a putatively more efficient private sector, at least in Delhi. Yet it works with a new actor providing security and exclusivity to the wealthy only. PASARA is not either the fruit of a deregulation, quite the contrary. The point is to regulate an existing market to favor certain entrepreneurs over others. In the term of the authority of the Ministry to the Interior of the Government of the National Capital Territory, that's a quite long title, the role of PASARA was to guarantee security for the guards themselves. The main objective was, I quote, ending the exploitation of the workforce. But the major objective was, who are the agencies? Who are the people running them? They could be a threat to the security of the country itself, end quote. In Delhi, the authorities have sanctioned the development of private security companies and helped the biggest of them by raising the cost of compliance to the new norms beyond what small businesses deployed in residential neighborhood can bear. Observations indeed indicate that resident associations award contracts to the lowest bidder, while mid and upper tier companies find no value in deploying guards in residential neighborhoods. They only deploy in malls, in metro, in public sectors, because the rate of profit is just too low, and in their view, lower than what is possible while complying with the laws and regulation in place. That's why I'm going to illegalism. Anyway, and to muddy further the water, the rules and regulations are by and large disrespected, not only out of carelessness, but mostly because the rules cannot even be all respected at the same time. Paradoxically, the illegalism of the upper classes makes the provision of security possible, not despite, but in spite of regulation. Here I have to describe in some detail the regulation of private security in Delhi. I take the example of training, as this particular aspect is at the core of several sets of regulation and fraught with contradictory incentives. It is also what is supposed to differentiate the amateur chowkidar from the professional guards. A paradox, as we know that chowkidars do it over generations. They do it sometimes for their entire lives. They're not amateurs, while guards, on the other hand, are mostly temporary migrants who rarely stay more than a few seasons, and who definitely do, and whose efficiency as security guard do not increase with training. So I apologize in advance, but I must describe a bit the intricacies of the Passera Act. The Indian Union Act of 2005 requires each state to appoint a control authority to draft a training program and to establish a list of companies that are granted operating licenses and verifies the application of the law. The Delhi Private Security Agency's regulation rules of 2009, enforced in Delhi, describe the training requirement. The letter must last approximately 100 hours of theoretical instruction and 60 hours of practical training. The controlling authority may withdraw accreditation from non-compliant institutes or organizations. The authority has published a list of 9 companies only, authorized to provide training. Let me recall that the same authority established at 250,000 to 500,000 the number of guards in Delhi. This includes the Home Guard, which is public, and trained men who volunteer to assist police forces, leaving a total of 8 private companies. Only 3 of these companies are on the list of authorized training centers published by the Security Sector Skill Development Corporation, to which I will turn below. The 3 companies that answers my questions about training confirm that their facilities are not being used due to a lack of demand. Passera regulations are not applicable for several reasons. First, in a highly competitive and labor-intensive markets, companies insist that they cannot afford to keep guards in training for a month. On the other hand, the guards, who are themselves temporary migrants, affirm that they cannot remain unpaid for the same period of time, even in exchange for the promise of a future and, in reality, elusive raise. Finally, entrepreneurs expect guards to be immediately available. As for training, it does not seem to bring any added value to the guards in terms of salary, nor to the companies in terms of efficiency or competitive advantage. Indeed, the principal employers I was able to interview seem perfectly satisfied with the price they pay for the presence they obtain. Apparently concerned about the low rate of compliance with labor laws among violence contractors, security guards companies, guards' salaries indeed rarely meet the minimum threshold set by law, and almost all of those I met had never seen their employment contracts. Almost all the guards I met had never seen their employment contract. The Union Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship has developed a policy to promote training for the guards. The aim is to move the guards' professions from unskilled to semi-skilled workers. More cynically, it is also probably mostly about fulfilling the numerical target of the Skill India campaign, launched by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi in 2015, to increase the proportion of trained manpower in the country. The ambitious target for the Skill India campaign is of 40 crores men, of 400 million people trained between 2015 and 2022. The rapid growth of the private security sector has provided this scheme with a huge pool of available and most captive workers. The National Skill Development Corporation, the NSDC, is responsible for setting the targets, allocating funds, and ensuring that training specifications are met. Now, again, I have to go into details. The Security Sector Skill Development Council was jointly formed by the Central Association of Private Security Industry and the National Skill Development Corporation. Trainings that it recognizes in Delhi. As I have indicated before, only 3 of them are also included in the list published by the Delhi Passera Authority, for whom I quote authority have the right to issue any certificate, period. So the training provider in the others is, according to the authority of the Ministry of the Interior, illegal. Be it as it may, the SSSDC organizes a training program with its partners companies for the guards already deployed. This recognition of prior learning reduces the training to 1 week of theory. I was able to attend one of these training sessions, which lasted about 7 hours in total, as twice the man in charge of the training didn't even show up. Yet the men were forced to stay an extra 2 hours between 6 and 8 a.m. at the end of a 12-hour shift, or to come early to make a complete workday of 14 hours in order to squeeze in the training. The training was then assessed by the Skill India Corporation, and of course, all the guard passed. 5 companies have been authorized by the SSSDC to conduct those recognition of prior learning trainings. One of them also signed training certificate in Delhi that boasts the company recognitions by the Passera authority. In addition to this scheme, SSSDC also gives accreditation to selected training centers to receive trainees from the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. In a nutshell, the Security Sector Skill Development Council gives accreditation to the training center for a fee. The company enrolls its guard there to train them. Then the PMKVY reimburses the company that advanced the fees in the first place. Most companies wishing to avail themselves of this state recognition will therefore, whenever possible, go through an agency recognized by PMKVY, so their expenses are covered. The expense of recognition PLS training. In a document dated on the 5th of April 2017, 12 companies have received such accreditations to give PMKVY training, none of them being accredited in the Passera authority list. The 2 companies focus on RPL training. The final cost is 0 and the time involved is the shortest. Indeed, why train guards at great expense for a month before the deployment when the guard can be put to work directly and then train in 7 days while being covered by a state grant? Companies trying to get recognized training cannot have it done legally from the Delhi Ministry of the Interior's point of view while being reimbursed by the Ministry of Labor. Several informants, some from official quarters, others from small business owners, reported on top of it fake classrooms being emptied after inspection, demands for bribes, and large-scale embezzlement from the SSSDC side. The organization, as a matter of fact, was disbanded in January 2018 due to misuse of funds, but not due to its general functioning. Indeed, the entire setup has not been fundamentally questioned. The SSC and the work of the NSDC and PMKVY are not in question, nor is CAPSI's claim to represent the interests of the sector touched. The Delhi Private Security Agency rules does not outline any penalties. I could not find any records of a company being charged or prosecuted for non-compliance with the Passera rule. The Passera authority regularly posts notice online asking for compliance with the law. A pretty sure sign that it is not the case. Between 2013 and 2017, 5 public notices and 2 circulars were posted on the Delhi authority website. When I asked why there had been no charges or enforcement actions, the Passera authority told me that the purpose was, for the time being, to build up a file with information on the companies and, once this file would be complete, to apply the law. So how does that verify? I took the addresses of all the companies registered in Saket and Dwarka Sector 10 from the Delhi Passera list of licensed companies. In Saket, all but one had closed or moved away. In Dwarka, the last trace that a security company named Fair and Lovely Security Guards, as a matter of fact, had ever resided there was a faded sign outside the window of what is now an evening school. For Passera authority, only half of Delhi's businesses could be registered on the list, and that's already a bold assumption. And yet it does not even take into account the inconsistencies of the list. So much for creating a database. The crux of the issue of street control is thus only partly in the regulatory assemblage. What is at stake is a different reading of the city in which security and seclusion have become synonymous. What Gertner calls the gentrification of state space has also given priority to the provision of security and rearticulated relations between police and guards. Indeed, there are even further scheme. To take advantage of the multiplication of security guards, the Delhi police, which I recall is under the control of the central government and not the control of the Ministry of the Interior to the government of the National Capital Territory, has proposed a scheme to harness the private manpower of security companies as a force multiplier at an additional marginal cost to the police. The announced idea is to use security guards, that's the phrase used by Delhi Police Commissioner in an interview, as the eyes and ears of the police. In the idea of the commissioner, the scheme did not need to remove any prerogative from the police, as it did not require a contract nor a down payment, but simply to train guards who were already there into calling them on open channels of communication with the forces. Basically to inscribe into the police scheme the presence of security guards, which so far is not recognized by the police. The Delhi Police Commissioner Patnaik launched the Community Police Prahari program in April 2017. The training, and I could only observe one, took place in South Delhi and consisted of a one-day event where several hundred guards were brought to the host caste police station compound and given paraphernalia like baseball caps and an orange vest. The Delhi police had asked several companies to send their guard for the events. And according to the guards, they were not paid. Interestingly, the district commissioner of police informed me that he had not seen fit to check the registration status of the guards, thus ignoring the scheme and the law laid down by the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, as well as the schemes and the law laid down by the Ministry of Home Affairs of the government of Delhi, respectively. The program is no longer advertised on the Delhi police website and has seemingly fizzled out, but the gesture of collaboration with private forces remains fundamental and new, especially from a corporation that generally express itself as superior and absolutely impossible to compare with security guards. The massive deployment of security guards, I stop my screen sharing once again, has changed the landscape of security provision in India and operates through a general disregard for regulation, including from one ministry to the next, as I have described above. Yet this illegalism is not only accepted by the consumer of security, it also works with the blessing of part of the security apparatus. Legislators, ambivalent about letting the security sector claim its legitimacy, have prohibited private security companies from wearing uniform that might suggest a proximity between the company and the states. Yet the uniform of the guards, in their shapes, their colors, their accessories, such as the badge, the stars on the shoulders, or the kind of hats that they're wearing, try to reproduce the language of the police state in slightly different hues and colors. Indeed, the imitation of the police and the army is, for the security companies, the guarantee of being taken seriously. The guards welcome their trainers while standing in attention. During the training in Manesar, the instructor who was correcting the position of one of the men insisted, "If the military can do it, you can do it too." Tifon and Graciani describes what they call the securitizing capital. Inspired by a Bourdieusian approach, they show how belonging to the upper rank of public armed forces assures a recognized pool of competences in the domain of security, including discipline and commanding capacity. The retiring officers thus find further employment opportunities in the field of private security, even if the actual work that has very little to do or very little to compare with the one they had during their active careers. At the level of the companies, the transmission of know-how and attitude from the armed forces to the private security sector is ensured by the regular hiring of former military or paramilitary into the higher rank of security guardsmanship. A ranking employee from the security of Saket Mall for example, whom I could interview, claimed to have illustrated himself during the Green Wars against the Maoists in Jharkhand. The head of one of the companies whose training class I joined in Saket Mall claims that he was a colonel in the Black Cats, the elite commandos of counter-terrorism and VIP protections. Yet the securitizing capital does not always trade well, and it does not suffice to go above interministerial tensions, which flares when a legitimate authority is ignored by another one, even when all the hierarchic chain of an institution, such as a security sector skill development council, is composed of generals and colonels of all hues of khaki, green, and blue. The Passera authority mentioned in an interview that the security sector, I quote, that the security sector skill development council is absolutely a scam in which some generals are making huge money out of government funding, and that scam will one day blow up. SSSDC is like a retirement pension for army generals, end quote. However scathing, this comment officializes, rather than it dismisses, the tendency to recruit in commanding positions the former elite of the Indian defense apparatus, even though, and precisely despite, the illegalism that directs the organization of the organizing of those institutions. During my fieldwork, several interviewees, in particular among the employers, called the guards bamboo stick with a uniform, mentioned alcoholism, or pointedly insulted them as too dumb to drive a rickshaw. This attitude, however, does not stop the hiring of guards. In such condition, it is out of the question for the policemen to recognize that their work is fundamentally the same as that of the guards. Conversely, amongst the guards, there appears to be no desire to be identified with the police, themselves widely considered to be corrupt, violent, and unpredictable. Despite these differences, the goal of creating a market for force that will actually privatize the mission of the police, unsurprisingly, has its eulogist. The Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FICCI, which represents the interest of Indian capitalists, sees the merging of police and private security as an opportunity for business. According to it, constitutional provision protecting citizens could hamper the economic growth of the sector, even though the sector does not seem to be having difficulties in growing, as the same federation boldly claimed at 25% growth in its annual turnover in 2017. FICCI therefore deplores that there is, I quote, zero right of detention. Currently, there is no provision in the Passera law that gives private security officer a right to detain. In developed economies, private security officers can detain a suspect until local authorities take over the situation, end quote. The illegalism that permits the dominating class of Delhi to secure the neighborhood is also functioning partly with the blessing of other nodes of the security system. The accaparement of the upper ranks of the private security companies by former military officers and security experts does not legalize the surveillance of Delhi, but on the contrary, smooth the path for legitimizing the enclavization of Delhi, itself turning to emancipate itself further from the purview of police forces. Standing by the iron gate that closed the block to a quiet tree-lined street in the south of Saket, Shem Kampur sits on a plastic chair, letting the afternoon heat roll above us. He has been a guard there for the last 2 years. He earns 7,000 rupees a month, but the cost of his black uniform was deducted from his first salary. Before coming to Saket, he was a house painter. One day he fell from his scaffolding and broke his leg. Since then, he has been limping. He can't climb scaffolding anymore. He can't run. He had no choice, he told me. He had to become a guard. The physical fitness training prescribed by Passera, written for the training of security guards, consists of a daily jog of 3 kilometers for men and 2 kilometers for women. For induction, an officer should be able to run up to 1 kilometer in 6 minutes for the age group of 18 to 30 years. I did not ask Mr. Kampur how fast he could run that kilometer. The security provision functions in Delhi by ignoring and bypassing sets of inherently contradictory regulations. Laws organizing the markets of private security in Delhi have tended to herd private classic actors into a market for force, spearheaded by large national and international companies making significant margin of profit. This scaled by the reorganization of the sector that evicted traditional chowkidars. The security guards are supposed to follow an organized training that makes them fit the categories of semi-skilled worker. The security provision in Delhi functions through a certain illegalism that lobs the wheels and keep together the different members of security assemblage. That is, this informal multiple set of regulation, people, institution, and material elements that create a landscape, controlling the movement of the many at the request of the few. That that example of Chaim Kapoor was precisely to show how not only unrespectable the rules are, but also how the fact that if they were respected, most of the guards would actually lose their jobs. And during interviews, the pastoral authority also mentioned that one of the reasons ultimately why the rules are not respected is to not put 250,000 men into unemployment. I will stop here, and I thank you for your attention.
Okay, thanks, Damien. It's a very wonderful presentation and a lot of things which we generally don't pay attention to, but happen around us. So for me, I would say an eye-opening presentation also about security guards. Any questions from participants? I can see Stephanie Hedge, her hands up. So Stephanie, do you want to go first?
Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Damien, for this presentation, or rather depressing one, but let us try to, I mean, I have many questions actually, and so I'll start with two questions that want to take the notion of security in security guards seriously. Perhaps, you know, after listening to you, it's not a relevant question, but I'm going to ask it nevertheless. So do we have statistics about crime in Delhi's neighborhoods? And do you have any way to actually compare neighborhoods with guards and neighborhoods without guards and to check the rate of crime? I mean, I've been watching the season 2 of Daily Crime recently, and you know, that gives you a terrible impression of the situation. Behind this question, of course, is the question whether security guards in neighborhoods such as those of South Delhi are meant to ensure security, or are they more a kind of status symbol, something that asserts the social status of the residents of the neighborhood? And the related question is, how do these people actually define security? Did you have a chance to talk about what is security with the guards themselves, with the so-called training agencies? Because of course, listening to you, I think of feminist works like those of Shilpa Fatke and her co-authors, who showed that security guards are actually a threat to the security of women who lose anonymity in their neighborhoods, and therefore will be likely to take greater risks, you know, when coming back home at night. So I'll stop at that for now.
I will start by the end asking you, I am not aware of all the literature on that recently, but I'm very interested, and that's also something I've been trying to work on. If you could give me the 2 last reference that you mentioned, I would be very interested to read that.
Okay.
But I will start by restart from the top. I do not have I have not found a meme yet, at least to compare the crimes in security with or without guards. And what seemed to appear, however, if we compare cities to cities, but to start with, comparing crime statistics is something that's extremely tricky among countries, because the nature of the crime is always dependent on the formulation of the law. So what is considered an aggression in a place will not be considered an aggression in a place. Also, the way the statistics are made is also depending on how we register a case. Like for example, in India, if there is a robbery and a murder, you will only register the murder in the statistics, because it's you register only the worst, according to the Indian Penal Code, offense. So it's extremely difficult to have a clear view. The only thing that people tend to use for comparing security with the murder rate, which is rather low in Delhi, as a matter of fact, contrary to what we think or what we hear. It's low in comparison to other countries. It was 2.5 per 100,000 people. If you compare with major cities in South America, it would be 60 for 100,000 people. So it basically means that there is not a lot of murders, but that doesn't mean there is no criminality, and it remains extremely complicated to justify or to compare. But we are stuck with impression because there is no, to the best of my knowledge, systematic study of what we call victimation, like how people do report, how people like feel what exactly happened. There is, of course, there is also the problem of reporting. And will the police record your complaint? Will they record it the way they want or the way you want? And will they sometimes underreport it to facilitate, or on the contrary, to make more complex an action? All that makes comparison in crime statistic extremely complex, and I would not venture into it without a big set of literature to clear my path. In South Delhi, it appears clearly that the guards are indeed status symbol, because they're not. What we could observe is that the growth of security guards seems rather to be parallel to the growth of felt insecurity, and definitely not to reduction of security. So either the guards are useless, or on the contrary, they are creating zones in which there is more insecurity. And it's particularly the case for women. If there is not, if the statistics on murders are rather low in Delhi, the statistics on crimes against women tend to point at Delhi as we used to say the rape capital of India. I'm not sure if it's still the case. It used to be the case a couple of years ago. But if it shows anything, is that guards are completely useless to tackle that issue. And when I interviewed the security companies on that particular case, they were always replying that there was no formation for that, and there was no demand from the group. Like the RWAs were not demanding security guards to be trained for handling women's security at all. And that's quite why so? Also because when I interviewed RWAs about that, like women who were part of the RWAs of the governance of the neighborhoods were basically asked to take care of the flowers on the park, and the question of security were left to the men, as if there seemed to have no connection between women in security and the hiring of guards. And even worse, when asked that question, a lot of informants from the upper class neighborhood, female informants from the upper class neighborhoods, were quite often saying that it would rather be the category of the guards, or the guards themselves, who would be part of crime against them, or ensuring a form of domination, of masculine domination on the streets, than rather than helping them, which actually can be also criticized. The guards are also the presence of on the streets of a certain type of body, like of the body of the rural workers who are imported into the middle of upper class neighborhoods, in which you have a certain type of body ethos of hexes that is quite the opposite of that masculine worker body, who tend to represent or be represented as a danger more because of its, as much because of its masculinity and poverties, and because of its actual behavior. So it's something I'm still trying to work on. I hope I have somewhat answered your question, and I didn't raise more questions than I solved. But I think I have made the turn of the question to where I was, at least in my reflections about that.
Thanks, Damien. One thing which struck me with your answers was that how the Delhi police was calling them eyes and ears of the police, the guards, but at the same time, they are not, right? In all practice, they are not even police-like. Although I have noticed that a lot of times they do help policemen. I mean, in neighborhoods when police has to enter, they have to enter through guards, or they'll be going within the neighborhoods with the guards and all. So RWH forced those things, but at the same time, there is no coordination outside.
No, the police will refuse that assimilation.
Yeah.
And yet they're also part of security assemblage. So they will indicate where things are. But this said, it might be true if there is like in 18 in Noida, for example, there was a particular case of an employer who abducted her maid after accusing her of stealing. She has withdrawn salary. The maid came back to the apartment to ask for her wages, and the employer abducted her. And the villagers around the place did come back to the colony and kind of besieged it, demanding the maid to be returned. And at that moment, the guards were kind of forced to act as a complete protection of the neighborhood. They didn't. There was no intervention of freeing the maid or of actually pacifying the situation or having kind of a law and order situation. It was a block against block. So the guards were here to defend the neighborhood, including whatever happened. So when the police arrived, they started by freeing the maid, which was kind of a way to de-escalate the situation. The guards are not here to de-escalate. So right. It's a bit of a difference. Mukta, I think you have your hand, and then I see Prajita and Joel also up there.
Yeah, I think I'll let Prajita and Joel go first. As host, we have host privileges, so we have to come last. So I'm going to get Prajita, if you can speak, and Joel then after that. Maybe we can take both questions, Damien, if you're okay with that.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, go ahead. Prajita, go ahead.
Thanks, Mukta. I think I missed it, but would you want to talk a little bit more about the illegitimacy, but also just the radical lack of democracy in the way RWAs came up, and then the way they sort of were so integral to the way security guards came, and without RWAs, there are basically no private securitization. And also, what is the status? Again, you might have mentioned it, I might have not paid attention. Sorry, on the status of the RWA in the act that you mentioned, or is there complete erasure? Because that's perfect assemblage theory, right? Because they came, they sort of performed their business, and then they basically are the the wheels that are running the whole show, and nobody even seems to question their legitimacy, whereas they are literally running the country into never mind, that's another rant. All right, yeah, so just the status of RWAs and making security guards so disposable, like you said. Thanks.
Joel, you wanted to
yeah,
go ahead?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you well, thank you.
Great, yes, thanks. Sorry, I wasn't sure. Just thanks for your presentation and for all these details. So I'm sorry again, just similarly, if I missed out on a few details. I was wanting to ask you about the expression you use at one point. You said entrepreneurs of violence. So I wanted to know if you could elaborate a bit on that, in particular on a few points such as the right to exercise violence. But again, I might, have missed out on a few details in your presentation, and in particular about the right to carry weapons. Although, I mean, being in Delhi again right now, I see that they don't carry weapons, but I was just wanting to know if you could enlighten us on these particular aspects, the right to violence, the expression of entrepreneurs of violence, what you meant really by that, and the particular aspect of carrying weapons or lathis or, whatever it is, pepper sprays for that matter, it could be anything. Thanks, that's all.
Okay, so I didn't work directly on RWAs, and most of my work on RWAs is based on secondary literature. I think I mentioned Asher Gärtner, but of course he's not the same. I think Stephanie has a lot more to say than me on that front. But indeed, and that's not something they have mentioned a lot. RWAs were instrumental in the growth of private security. In many ways, they also were there when the chokidars were replaced by security guards. Chokidars are it's kind of a one-on-one contract, or at least like a form of hiring that has become illegal in 2009. It's now illegal to have a chokidar in Delhi. You have to pass through a registered security company. And the RWAs were, and their faith in the market was also instrumental in the growth of the security sector because of this, the hiring of security guards to secure a much larger and much more even systematic area, whereas a chokidar would stay in front of one house or in front of one place, or kicks a stick the entire night around the neighborhood to show that he's here. It was not like standing at a gate in that systematic fashion with this kind of uniform that they're wearing. So yeah, the question of illegitimacy of RWAs is kind of tricky. It's like they're legitimate from their point of view, and they use precisely that for me, but it's kind of difficult to demonstrate. They use the illegalism of the security sector and the way security can hang itself to the state as a way to justify how they hire guard and how they reorganize the city around that notion of security, which in many ways is a notion of security that is everybody to their place. It's like the way dirt is matter in the wrong place, insecurity is people in the wrong place for at least for the security guard and RWAs. So they are private as the city in a way. They also private as security that goes with it, and it's always been for me, and luckily for me in many ways, an understudied aspect of many urban studies that have taken a deeper look in RWAs and local elite democracy. The term entrepreneur violence, I used it. I didn't define it well. I borrowed it from Michael Seigel, who defines security guards and police as violent workers, because she questions the difference between the two. For her, there is no major, like there is no de facto difference between the two except in law. And they actually do the same job. Like police will sit in front of the house of the IPs all day, or secure some neighborhoods by just like slowing down the cars. And for her, she works in the context of America, not of India, but it works pretty well. She called violent workers the entire membership of a security apparatus, which helped her to think through and pass this kind of very relative distinction between police and guards, at least in America. And this, even though the guards' work is actually not very violent, and even the police work is not very violent. So the most, she points out that the most dangerous work in America is shop owners, not police. People who get the more assaulted are shop owners, not guards. And but what makes them like violent workers is because the threat of the possibility of always resorting to violence in dernier ressort, when they have to, is always there. There is always at least a statement of strength. So so for her, what security workers, like violent workers, are people who are indeed always there to always have access to violence as a dernier recours in case something happens. And entrepreneur violence are basically those people who are selling or hiring that threat, that way of organizing the city and the streets. And as such, in terms of right to exert violence, there is no right to exert violence. And the police is clear on that. The guards do not have the right to fight. They have the right to detain, contrary to what Vicky says, by the way. But in the same way that every Indian citizen has the right to detain. The Code of Criminal Procedure states quite clearly that if anybody is witness to a punishable offense, you can detain someone and call the police, and provided you explain the person why you are detaining him or her. That's not specific to the guards. That's everybody in the street. If you see someone committing a violent crime and you can't stop him. Wait for the police. That's basic. But the guards have there is not in the laws now in the rules of regulation anything specific for the guards on that. And it's true also for the right to bear arms or to carry weapons. The guards I have studied are non-armed security guards. There are a few guards who have the right to bear arms, but they have their private license. When you see them operating sometime around the ATMs or when they are particularly like bringing new fresh cash into the ATMs, then you have a few guards who have guns who look more dangerous for the person who would shoot than for the persons who will be shot at. But in any way, they still have guns, and but it's their personal licenses. There is no particular licensing system for the guards that has been put in place. And it's quite interesting, as a matter of fact, in itself.
Thank you, Damien.
Ali, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I'll just call her in. Yeah. There you go. Ali, you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, great. Damien, thanks for a really great talk. I really enjoyed it. And talking about the upper classes. And in your abstract, I look back and you argue there that the functioning of security guardsmanship of Delhi hinges on an illegalism, of the upper classes that facilitates their domination over the urban landscape of Delhi. But when you were getting into the details of regulation, it really struck me the extent to which the state or different parts of the state create and maintain this illegalism in different ways. So I was wondering to what extent you would argue that this is an illegalism that's between the state and the upper classes is in creating and maintaining this kind of environment of illegalism. Thanks.
Can I add on to that? I mean, just so that we can bunch these questions again.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can add on to that.
Do you want to answer Ali first?
No, go for it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was basically intrigued by, so I look at the unorganized sector work more broadly. I'm interested in migrant workers, and that sort of taken me to all kinds of work that migrant workers do. And I was just wondering in terms of, how the security industry is organized and the location of guards within that industry, as compared to other industries which also thrive off a similar kind of informal labor practices, while the firms and corporations involved in the work themselves are actually formal and within the formal structures. So for example, a G4S is it's a fully registered formal company, but the guards don't have contracts and are informally employed. And that's a fairly normal way of functioning across sectors in India. So I'm just trying to understand where the demand for this law or for any form of regulation in this is even coming from. The skilling thing has confused me, but it's confused everybody. I mean, this question of the whole explanation and the whole dysfunctionalism of the prior learning, recognition of prior learning, and all of that has been noticed and written about across all sectors which have this particular characteristics of formal firms and informal workers. So what's so special about the security industry in your commentary about the failure of legislation, corruption, and all of that? I don't see why that's particular. I mean, what's so particular about security? And are you coming at it from the perspective? I mean, who who are you concerned about when you're asking these questions? Are you concerned about the city and its security? Are you concerned about neighborhoods and how they're governed? Are you concerned about security guards and their location in the world of work and employment? So I'm a little confused in all the things you said, which perspective you're actually coming from, because I find it hard to distinguish the experiences of the guards and their identity as workers from other unorganized sector workers.
Well, I will repeat that. I should never have let you add on that question.
But I did.
Clearly, I actually kind of forgot what the original question, as a matter of fact.
Ali, maybe come back and say what your question was.
Because it got me a bit confused. I will start. Ali actually wrote her question, so I can actually reading. To what extent, the question is to what extent it's an illegalism of the upper class, and how the fact that they are upper class deal with the state. So it's quite rich, and it's quite it's where it's kind of difficult to answer for me. For me, it's an illegalism of the upper class because that's they are the one who decide how the system works. As simple as that. The illegalism of the lower class is called differently. It's not how the system works. I mean, it can be how the system functions, but it's generally punished, or it's not considered as a norm. That's why the term of Foucault, where it is the term escapes me, will come back, but he describes it in a different manner. I think here what I use to explain this merging of illegalism and upper class is through the concept developed by Gärtner of gentrification of the state space, but I don't think it's quite completely enough. I think I probably have to go a bit deeper in that to explain how that precisely works. I'm not sure I can do that from the standpoint of urban geography entirely, and I would probably have to borrow to work with someone who is more into policy than I am. And I think I'm a bit at the maximum of what I can do in terms of policy here, and I hope that I don't think that answers your questions, but I hope that shows a limit of what I can answer as of right now. As a question, and it's kind of more definitely more aggressive question of informal, informal, and why is it what's special about urban security? Well, not much actually. Of course, it's not. No, it's not. It's not unique. And indeed, I talked briefly at some point of the of the skill sector council, the SSCs. There are several. There are at least 9. It's growing or regressing according to the need of the market, but there are several sectors that are indeed trying to get some form of training, who are trying to reformalize a certain number of sectors. Also, because there were some consultants saying that the problem with India is a lack of formal labor, so they've been trying to train people who are already trained through recognition of prior learnings. It works the way it does. What is so special about the security industry is that well, I do think that the security industry has something special in that it constrains people more efficiently or more violently than cotton workers. If you the security guards will have an impact on your displacement, on your right to move, on your right to appropriate the city, the way the cotton weavers will not. If you are a poor worker trying to get into a new neighborhood, you will not have a problem with the cotton weaver. You will have a problem with the security guard. In many ways, their impact on the life of others is, I think, what justifies a particular care, particularly when it comes to the fundamental rights of others. I've been a bit critical on the question of right to the city in a case, I mean, in a city in which there is so many security guards, because in many ways, if if in a city in which there is between 1 and 2 million of security guards, I'm not sure the concept of right to city works. I mean, you have this problem of permanent accaparement and permanent displacement of population and permanent eviction of some neighborhoods because you have that entire industry that's there. It's not any industry; it's an industry that impacts you. So that's kind of my take on it. Does that mean that the cotton weaver industry doesn't impact you? Well, it does, but a little less, or a little less violently. At least I've never been threatened or kicked away by a cotton weaver. let's admit it. And second, and why it's also important, is that it takes the appearance of the state. And I think also kind of answers the previous question a little. Even if the guards are kind of working through illegalism, even if they are informal, even if they are just there for months before they go, at least that takes the language of strength and they take the language of legitimacy in a way that is quite unique to them. The uniform they wear, the simple fact that they're wearing a uniform, that they call it standing on duty, and the way they present themselves as agent of legitimation almost is present. And to bounce back also, I'm kind of thinking out loud here, but to bounce back also to what Stephanie was saying in her first question, the guards are indeed signaling that this or that neighborhood belongs to the upper class. Okay, clear. But what more does it say? It also says that this part of the city is legitimate. It's a place to be in. It's here things are belonging, if you want, to the civil society. The fact that the civil society is working through legitimacy itself, there's a consensus on that. The civil society expresses itself in the language of the law, but doesn't respect the law for itself, with the laws for the others. But the presence of the guards tend to affirm this, that this neighborhood, even though it might be an encroachment, is legit. At least it has the strength to back it off. That's how I would answer that question. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay.
There's a question from Vikas.
Yes. Vikas.
So you mentioned many things like illegality, security. Now, my simple query is, given the state of unemployment in India, given the employment crisis, given increasing workforce participation, now the thing is, why one would wish to work in security industry? Is there any incentive to work in security industry provide, like, as compared to, you have talked about the act for the security personnels. Do they provide some incentives to work also? Why I'm talking about this is because of some recent instances where security guards have been threatened by those whom they provide security. Okay,
that's actually quite current, yeah, common.
Yeah, so is there any incentive to work also? A second thing is, do you think some kind of agreement between government and private industry may help in improving the status of these security guards as well as the service standards? A kind of PPP model. Yeah, now you can proceed. Yeah.
I don't think there is any incentive, but I will quote one of the guards I interviewed during my fieldwork, and so I asked him why he had chosen security guardianship. I did ask that question, and he told me, well, sometimes I'm posted inside the mall and then I have the AC. Okay. So I guess that was his answer. I guess it's better than the assembly line in terms of the hardship of labor. I think it might be better than the assembly line, and also that gives them an opportunity to bully other people. And when I interviewed maid servant or servant associations to ask that. They all reported that the guards were like behaving in a particular way towards them that was kind of bullish, and in many ways that offered them an opportunity to exert a certain form of power that can be say pleasant, or at least yeah, again, better than the assembly line. That's the only answer that we'll have to that. Has there been any agreement between the state and the security agency? There have been several attempts to create that, including through particularly the SSSDC is such agreement originally. It's a way to train the guards in the hope of getting in the hope of increasing their salaries, of making them more regular, it's like in lowering the turnover rate of the security guards. Most guards come for 6 months and then they leave. It was also a way to make them stay longer. But that didn't work for several reasons. First, because there seems to be little incentive. Most of the guards are convinced they will find another job when they come back, and the companies seems to have plenty enough people to work with. And also because the RWAs, back to them, seems completely unwilling to pay more. They pay actually they pay only the salary for 8 hours of guards per day, time to shifts. They pay only the salary, not the rest. And the companies make them work 12 hours instead of 8, and they pocket the difference. That's pretty much how the business model is constructed. So for now, there is no scope of an improvement of their work, or an improvement or an agreement with the state, because there is no money getting into it. So they seem to be going to the lowest bidder in a kind of systematic manner. And also, it's remained to be proven that there is any gain in efficiency. Like training, again, cotton weaver. So to get back to that example. You might have a gain in efficiency or in your job being better done, but in a security guard, if the only thing he sells is his sheer presence, training him or not training him will not change anything to that. Particularly if there is no violence, threat of violence or gun involved. You're just gonna have a guy, train or not, it's the same result. So that's pretty much I think that answers the question mostly.
Thank you.
Stephanie, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, actually, I had a question which was very much tying up, I think, with what Aprajita and Ali said before. I was wondering, listening to you and listening about this pretense of regulation, which is actually de facto a lack of regulation of the security guard, if it would not be productive to think of security guards as an important part of what could be called perhaps the security culture of Delhi and other cities, and as being a form, as pertaining to what looks like an increasing importance of vigilantism in Indian cities. And I'm thinking that because you mentioned that security guards were supposed to be the eyes and ears of the police, and this is exactly how the Aam Aadmi Party described the Suraksha Dal, that the members, what the members of the Suraksha Dal should do, when they came to power in Delhi, and they tried to organize this group of citizens who would, basically patrol neighborhoods at night and make sure that everything was fine. And the party has again taken up this idea in its latest manifesto for the Punjab elections and talked about, participatory policing. So it seems to me that, if you look at how security guards are intimately linked with RWAs and how RWAs have historically embodied a form of participatory management of urban affairs in Delhi, at least. This is just, a suggestion. I don't know how to connect vigilantism and illegalism, because I'm not familiar enough with the concept of illegalism. But I was just thinking it might be fruitful.
Yeah, it's not something I could observe in my fieldwork yet, at least in Saket and in the neighborhoods in which I have worked. They seem to that there was no such example. Of course, well, I would be very interested to see it. Actually, I will have to definitely do more fieldwork on that. I could not. The vigilantism is indeed, generally speaking, people going directly, upper class going directly into the street, taking the stick and indeed doing that work for themselves. In that case, it was completely outsourced to security guard. In the case I could study. So yeah, I don't have a lot to say on that, except that I would really be interested in witnessing that or understanding better how it works. But unfortunately, that's not something I could witness doing that field work. So nothing much. Sorry. I hope to be able to answer that in a not too distant future, but fortunately, right now, it was really so also a question of security and securitization were really outsourced to security guards and not taken in their own hands, except when the people were like themselves surveilling the surveillors. That is like verifying that the security guards were not drunk, etc. But it was kind of managerial approach to the security guards and not like not any form of self-justice like vigilantism can be. Sorry.
Okay, I have a question, Damien. I was thinking about it, and I wrote it in the chat also. But did you trace the networks through which these people come in these jobs? Like, what kind of networks are they, and from where? Like, what regions, what places they are coming to this trade, the security guards, and it's connected. And I'm thinking that what sort of impact would Skill India campaign, Skill India mission would have had on this, especially because we can see that a lot of these training centers which you were talking about are actually springing up in tier 3, tier 4 towns, like very small towns where these training centers are springing up, and they get a lot of money from the government, of course, for running these training centers. And they are training people in different trades. And then a lot of times from my other interactions with the researchers, they don't end up coming to the cities. Like these training centers will skill the workers, but they don't have the same networks through which they are able to send them in the metropolitan cities or somewhere to take up the trade. So do you see any that kind of activity happening in training security guards also in a smaller places in India?
Okay, that's those are interesting, also interesting questions. I try to trace who do they come, and in several places, including in the SSDC, for example, they all told me that they were going to job fairs in the countryside and sending buses and getting people from different areas of India. I could never observe that. I could not meet a guard who had come through a bus. It seemed to be quite of a lore, or at least a story that the industry liked to tell to itself. But I really tried, but I could not observe such recruitment drive. And since I could not observe it, I tend to doubt their existence, to be honest. What was more classic and kind of stranger, but at least more unexpected for me, was that most of the guards I interviewed were Brahmins. And there is definitely a bias of recruitment toward Brahmins in security companies. So why so? I am not sure, and to this date, I'm not sure if it's demand-driven or supply-driven. I have seen both cases. Is it because there is a network that goes like a bit further, or people like bring in their friends, bring in their families? So some security company owners were telling me that they were hiring jazz from Bihar, recommended by another jazz from Bihar, and have basically rolling flows of jazz from Bihar. And indeed, these companies was mostly Bihari and UP Brahmins. In all the, I think, 87 guards I could meet, there was one SCST I could meet, and he had paid bribe to get into security guardianship. All the others denied that they had to pay any form of bribe, and they were all, I mean, like in a large majority in those neighborhoods, upper caste. I am not sure it's true everywhere in India at all. I would be actually even surprised to have the same kind of caste composition in smaller cities. That's my hunch. I cannot prove it yet. I actually, if you guys have a few months of salary to give me so that I can do actual fieldwork on that question, please, I will circulate a hat among you and please pitch in. Meanwhile, I'll have to satisfy with my hunch on thinking that this is quite a unique case to Delhi, or at least to the major cities, because of the more distant networks of recruitments that passes through caste system. I have also seen in some security, in some LWAs, in particular in Prashad Nagar, which is a very Brahmin neighborhood, people asking, like people of the LWA asking specifically a guard to bring another Brahmin guard. So in the beginning, I made a few suppositions. Is it because to kind of preserve the purity of the neighborhood? Is it because there is no manual labor involved, and therefore there is no Kali Hat Karna kind of feeling? I am not sure that those hypotheses validate. I think it's mostly a matter of recruitment, but I'm not completely certain why I did write an article about that, but I still cannot answer my own question. Sorry, but yeah, so that's all. It's clearly seen that the guards were coming to the city, seeing other guards, asking the guards how to get to the recruitment place, get to the recruitment center, send in, and buy their uniform and be deployed the next day. It's pretty much how it happened. They said it's pretty easy. You have a guard every neighborhood. It's kind of easy to find one and ask him where to get a job. In an industry that claims 30% of turnover year after year, it's kind of easy to find a job there. I am not sure, therefore, and by the same token, of how Skill India has helped. I tend to think none. Not at all in Delhi, at least, or at least back when I was in my fieldwork, it was not helpful. And again, I could not go in third or fourth tier cities to verify that. But are you talking about Skill India's training center in general, or are they like focusing on security? Because the security SSDC has been disbanded, so I'm not sure how much they still work with Skill India.
Yeah, so for me, I have seen a lot of training centers. I mean, they are training people in different skills. I was just wondering if they are also training people in the skills of security guard.
But in theory, yes. But in practice, all the specifications were not met. And most of the places, there were like 3 or 4 such places in Delhi, and they were like the training ground was empty. Also because they were the easier and simpler way to do it. Like you just like hire the guy, deploy him, and then give 3 months later you get an RPL for one week instead of 1 month of training. You have saved your money, and it doesn't change anything.
Right.
So it was not where if you want to be reimbursed by the state, you have to not play by the book.
Right.
So,
okay.
So yeah, I guess at least it was the case at the time. I will have to see how things have changed since 2019.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on this question of the segmentation of the labor market. I mean, I think in my previous comment, what I was trying to urge you to do is, if you want to see the security guard industry from the labor perspective, then I think it might help to zoom out a little bit and then zoom back in, because it's not just security work. All of the unorganized work we see is very, very specific. I mean, there's a very, very clear and historic segmentation pattern that the labor market in India follows, which is of course related to caste, tribe, identities, social networks, all of that. For example, industrial workers are almost always OBCs. because not just because of social networks, but because over time, and this goes back to colonial constructs, there is a certain construction of identity of certain castes and certain tribes as being good at something or not good at something, or being lazy or being, unreliable, or so the amount of control that certain kinds of workers need in order to perform whatever they are expected to perform has already been sort of, there's a social understanding of that. So that was also my, like when I was talking about previously, I felt like the security industry actually has a particular location in that. And what's interesting about it is that it has grown so much recently. So this is not necessarily coming from colonial constructs, but there is a new sort of an industry which is building on older ideas also. So there's something going on.
But and it's interesting you said that, because when I started my fieldwork, I was expecting to find Gurkhas, and they have kind of disappeared from Delhi. Since 2009, it's actually banned to hire Gurkha. I was expecting, yeah, because it knows they have to be of Indian origin. You cannot hire foreigners anymore. They've banned it. They've banned the Gurkhas. I was also expecting to find what the colonial system would call warrior classes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's consistent with what you're saying. They're not hired as warriors. They're hired as gatekeepers.
They're hired as gatekeepers, and
a Brahmin can do gatekeeping far better than, because they have
that's actually where I'm going. Is they're good at sorting people, if you want. Or they're good at assigning people to their place. That's pretty much how it's how it comes out. They basically do that job of assigning people to where they are supposed to be at. That's
and also they have to, and I know Ali and me had a long conversation about this. They're also supposed to be behave in a particular way of supplication and politeness to the elites whom they serve. So it's a very, not only do they have to put outside people in their place, people who are coming into these neighborhoods, but they also have to behave with the residents of the neighborhood in a particular way. And that sort of slightly more sophisticated or genteel behavior is somehow expected that Brahmins will be able to carry that off. There's also
more or less, because there is also a kind of
contact with these people all the time, right? You're asking them, don't send my maid up today. There's a lot of domestic information that is passing through security guards. So you're trusting someone. There's a trust issue there.
That's absolutely true. In the same time, if they are supposed to behave in a particularly subservient way, the reverse is that they're also completely despised, and that doesn't sit so well being with being a Brahmin. So actually there is a conflict in that among security guards and in security guards in their current job. If you remember that campaign, maybe Chokidar.
Yes, absolutely.
Someone as it was Subramaniam Swami, I think, replied, "I cannot be a Chokidar because I'm a Brahmin." But it cannot be in that position of subservience.
But doesn't it also speak to the larger conversation in there's a politics emerging where upper caste, Jats, Gujars, Brahmins, there's a whole segment of them, of those who occupy those castes but were economically left behind, who are making them, so they have occupied again specific parts of this labor market, So it's an interesting sort of, because not all Jats are highly propertied and landed. Not all Rajputs have ancestral property worth millions. So what happens to those who don't have that kind of in those upper castes? So there's that complexity and the kind of demands that then they are making on the Indian state and the kind of dignified jobs that they're expecting.
I published something on this in French. If you want, I can send you the translation. I'm actually trying to figure a way to bring it somewhere to English, and another of the paper is accepting a paper that already been written in French. So if you're interested, I will send it to you.
That'd be great.
But yeah, it was a big question during my PhD. What to do with that information that I was not expecting. I was not expecting security guards to be Brahmins. That's for me was not something I was prepared. And again, I'm not sure. I would be very interested to know if that that the case in smaller cities and in tier cities? I'm not sure.
Prajita, just jump in. I think we're just like 7 of us now in this room.
Oh, okay. No, I just wanted to also say that
Only Samuel
there's
is
a
sitting outside this intimate room right now. Samuel, do you want to come in?
hi, Samuel. I just wanted to say that we should also think about racial stereotypes and caste and the way some subgroups would be seen as more masculine than others. So even within Brahmins or within OBCs, clearly a Jat who would be seen as more masculine than an upper caste. Or yeah, so the variations even within upper castes matter in terms of recruitment.
I also came across the gender differences. So women security guards are another story altogether, where they are
within masculinity also. Yeah, within the masculine, like who gets to be more. Yeah, that's all. I just wanted to flag that it may not be a simple story of like how higher the caste, then it's also about like even like somebody may be able to be more recruitable because he may be seen as more martial or more or someone who has more strength because of, I don't know, the way he is.
In view of the physics and the physical aspect of security guards, I'm not sure the matter of strength is really taken into account, but what I could observe is a lot of Matil Brahmins, for example, which consider themselves pretty high, but I don't want also to take the point of view of the Brahmins as the only way to explain that question. Like I'm trying to be careful on that, even though that was probably one of my issues in the beginning of my own work. And it's quite interesting what you mentioned about female security guards. I could interview one who herself was a Brahmin of origin, and who was the only one who was describing her work as emancipatory. Because for her, she when they came to they had to come to the city because her husband was not drinking the money he was earning as a guard, and her daughter fell sick, so they came to Ames, and so she had to find a job that she could not find in the countryside because of the expectation that she was being under of not working as a Brahmin woman. Yeah. And suddenly she finds herself wearing not a sari but pants and a shirt, gaining her own salary, getting respected at least by the people she could flag away. And she described her training as a fantastic week of learning positions and positioning. She was the only one who had something positive to say about security guardianship was a woman security guard I could interview, and it's quite interesting. I'm trying to write something about it currently, but it's not something I could.
In my field work was that women security guards were far more judged by appearance than male security guards.
So where do you?
They were the female security guards who were recruited by malls, especially, were asked to fit into a certain. I mean, they had to be slim, they had to be good looking. There was also all of that respondents brought up that the way the parameters through which they are judged or recruited are slightly different from the parameters of the men, which also gives you a clue into what is expected. Perhaps there's a difference in it because they're supposed to inspect women's purses. And I mean, there's a very specific, even within the security, very specific.
They have a very specific job, and they're not the one who are being put in the fire stuff or in the camera rooms. They're like four women in the women's toilet in Seven Shop in particular. So it's a very small proportion of the general guards population. You have never met nor heard of female security guard in a classic task of standing duty in front of a house.
Yeah.
This discussion gets me thinking also about the idea of labor, right? I mean, and Brahmins generally tending not to get into labor intensive jobs. So could it also be the reason that Brahmins tend to take up security guard jobs more?
It was one of my suppositions that indeed it was a job that does not bring in manual labor or sweat or
Or could it be the question
Really,
of
but I'm not sure.
touch? The fact that if someone touches them in a fight, if some car owner gets into a fight, there wouldn't be a thing of mujhe chua kaise? Tujhe, like in a fight with someone, you can bring up the worst, and an RWA probably does not want that angle. I don't know. I'm speculating here.
Yeah, why not? But maybe. Yeah, it's possible actually. I'm not sure they hire guards in the expectations of ever having to touch them, but it's actually a question. Yeah, why not? I've not explored that part. That particular
Okay,
hypothesis.
I think we should
Yeah.
wind up because now it's going into the realm of
Lots of
Okay.
questions to ponder, of course, but I'm sure that we look forward to your article coming out and reading it when it comes out, and also your book. Thanks a lot, Damien, for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank
Yeah.
you for your patience.
No,
We'll share the link to the video and you can maybe put it up or you circulate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and not many people, but thank you for coming in now, and we see you next month for the next session of CPR CSH workshop. Thanks, everyone.
All the best.